Okay, so the next section we're going to do is over the discriminant. The discriminant, you can find this on your formula sheet, but it won't say discriminant. It's going to say the quadratic formula. But within the quadratic formula, this underneath the radical, underneath the square root, b squared minus 4ac is the discriminant. So you find it on the formula sheet underneath the quadratic formula. Okay? So your formula for discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So this is basically our answers to everything here. This is what we're going to use. And you're going to probably have to remember this. So I'll try to help you remember this. So if your answer comes out, it's a positive number. So if it's a positive number, and it's a perfect square. So positive perfect square. So remember, if you don't know if it's a perfect square, just put it in your calculator. So for instance, like they're saying 9 is a perfect square. All you got to do is do second square root 9. And if it gives us a whole number, we know it's a perfect square. So these are perfect squares. So if you get one of these numbers for your answer, your actual answer is going to be 2 real solutions, or 2 real rational solutions. So most times they may say 2 real rational, whatever. So it's going to be 2 real. Okay, so what if your answer comes out positive, but it's, instead of saying none square, let's say it's not perfect. That's the way I normally say it's not perfect. So it's not going to be a perfect square. So, but it is a positive answer. So for instance, they gave me 7. So if I took the square root of 7, second square root of 7, I should get square root of 7, or if I toggle it, a decimal. So that's how I know that's not a perfect square. So with that one, instead of it being 2 real rational, it's going to be 2 real irrational. This is kind of like, I don't know if y'all ever been to like Ross or whatever versus a regular department store where you might have got it from. For instance, say Ross got some of Walmart clothes. And usually Ross get clothes that are irregular, meaning they're not quite perfect. There may be something wrong. A lot of times we can't see what's wrong with them, but most of the time they're not perfect. So we call them irregular clothes. And so another way of saying irregular, we would say irrational. And so irrational if it's not perfect. But if it's perfect, we're going to say those are your regular clothes. So I kind of see 2 rational as 2 regular. They're regular clothes. And then if they're irregular, we say those are irrational. So this is like Walmart. This is like Ross. Because Ross clothes, most of the time, you look on the tags of them, they even say irregular. Okay? So what if you get an answer of 0? So with 0, and this is how I normally remember 0. It says 1 real solution, but I like to spell out the word 1. And so you see here, that's like our 0 there. That tells me if it's 0, it's 1 real solution, 1 real rational solution. Okay? So if I get a negative number, it doesn't matter what it is, it's going to be 2 imaginary. So 2 imaginary. And it says there will be an I in the solution. Okay? So let's look at some examples. And so we're going to try to use that. So in order to do this, we're going to use our formula b squared minus 4ac. And remember, we find this discriminant formula under the quadratic formula. Okay? So our a is always going to be in front of the squared. Our b, which is negative 2, is always in front of our b term. And our c is always the one by itself. So a is 6, b is negative 2, and c is 3. And so I'm just going to write it out. So a lot of times so you can see it makes it a little bit easier. A is 6, b is negative 2. And I like to write it out like this so you'll know to put your negatives. and C is negative 3. So all I do now is take my formula and let me put parentheses. Wherever you have a letter, put parentheses because you're going to plug that in. Okay, so B was negative 2. So negative 2 squared minus 4. A was 6. And C was negative 3. These are really easy to do this. The hardest part about this is remembering what the answer is. And so if I get my calculator, I'm going to plug in parentheses negative 2 squared minus 4 parentheses 6 parentheses negative 3. And I get 76. So if I look here, I know it's not a negative answer. I know it's not 0. So it's going to be a positive answer, but I need to figure out, is it a positive perfect or a positive non-perfect? So what I do, I come and get my calculator and I take the square root of 76. And you see it gave me a radical, or if I toggle it, it gave me a decimal. So it's not perfect. So I can say it's positive and it's not perfect. And so if we come up here, remember this one's like Ross. So if we look at it, our answer is going to be 2 real irrational. So that's basically our answer. 2 real irrational. So 2 real irrational. Kind of like irregular clothes. Okay? So let's try number 2. And then you'll be able to try the rest of them. Uh-oh, sorry. Keep pulling up the wrong thing. Let's try this one. I'm just going to kind of make it bigger. So, well, let me cut it and put it here. Okay, so we're going to first label our A, B, and C. So our A is always in front of the x squared. So we get negative 2b. And don't get confused by this, guys. If there's no number, put a 1 in front. So it's negative 1. C is also negative 1. And our formula is b squared minus 4ac 4a times c. Okay? And I always put these in parentheses. So my b is negative 1 squared minus 4. My a is negative 2. And my c is negative 1. And all I'm going to do is plug this into my calculator. So we got parentheses negative 1 squared minus 4 parentheses negative 2 parentheses negative 1. And I get negative 7. So we're going to look here. My answer is negative 7. So I know it can't be these two as positive. It's not 0. So it's a negative answer. So my answer will be 2 imaginary. So that's basically what we'll be looking at. 2 imaginary. So I may do one more. Let's see. Let's do one more. Let me do this one. Cut. Okay, so let's do our A, B, and C. So our A is 5. Our B, our B is what's in front is a 1. C is negative 2. And then our formula, B squared minus 4AC and then we're just going to plug in. So for B, we're going to plug in 1 squared minus 4. A is 5. C is negative 2. And we're going to plug this in our calculator. And so we had parentheses 1 squared minus 4. 5 parentheses negative 2. and we get 41. So 41, first of all, is a positive number, so we need to figure out what it is. So it's not these. So if we take the square root of 41, square root 41, we get the square root of 41. If we toggle it, we get a decimal. So we know it's not perfect. So once again, we'll have two real irrational. So go ahead and stop the video and complete the rest of the problem.